The 830 High Beam Talk with the Doc. This is brought to you by Mako's Pharmacy at 240 East 3rd Street in downtown New Yorksville. Mako's Pharmacy is your local pharmacy with a caring and knowledgeable staff, which is focused on your health and wellness. And focusing in on our health and wellness now, Dr. Tim McKnight. Welcome in this morning. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine, thank you. How are you?
Well, I think I'm well. You know, you hate to lie to the doctor. I don't think I have any pains.
I'm watching you close. Be careful.
Okay. Hey, the thing we want to talk about this morning is seasonal, I guess, especially with although we don't have any college football around here, but the NFL season's getting ready to go, and we're already heading into week 3 of high school football. And before the COVID hit, a lot of talk about concussions, especially in football, but they are prevalent in other areas too, aren't they?
That's right, yes. Rugby is number 1, and then hockey and football be 2 and 3. But you can have it in you can see it in soccer, pretty common in soccer, and even in your sport, volleyball. Mm-hmm. So, as a coach, as a parent, as an athlete, you have to be aware of what to look for and make sure you get it diagnosed and treated appropriately. Otherwise, it can be very dangerous.
Well, and this could happen, obviously, in regular life. Anytime you're suffering a bang to the head, I guess.
Exactly. Right? Your skull is this round object with a very confined space in it, and the spinal fluid sort of cushions it. But the brain itself is obviously smaller than the skull, and when you fall, when you get kicked, or when you hit your head hard enough, it's just imagining a ball inside a confined space. It'll bang against one side of the brain of the skull, and then it'll ricochet and bounce off the other. And so these are hard angular forces, shear forces, that can damage nerves, which is what the brain's made up of, and also blood vessels, which you find on the surface of the brain and throughout the brain. So these are 2 structures that can be injured by a hard blow to the head. And but of course it's the symptoms that we have to watch for. Mm-hmm. And because if you miss these symptoms and an athlete returns to play in the midst of those symptoms, they become susceptible to a very dangerous condition called second impact syndrome that can happen before the brain is recovered. And that second blow to the head can even be a softer blow, but it can cause seizures because the nerves are really vulnerable at this point, and it can even cause cerebral hemorrhages or bleeding into the brain. And this can lead to death within a few minutes. And every year we see 1 or 2 of these somewhere around the country. And I think now with the protocols and with our awareness, those numbers have probably dropped. But it's a tragic thing when something like that happens. The other problem with the long-term side effect is multiple concussions, kind of like what we see in the NFL with some of these athletes, is it causes long-term cognitive problems and other problems with just daily functioning, with depression and those kind of things. Jim McMahon was a quarterback that I followed for a while, and he's really suffered now in his early 60s with it. I'm not sure he even goes out of the house anymore. And his memory is really impaired, and just his ability to get around. So it can be very dangerous.
I have a friend that played linebacker in college and the NFL linebacker.
Oh yeah.
So he was certainly affected by this, and football knowledge is burned into his brain, so to speak.
Yeah.
But we would go places, and he would have a hard time remembering how to get home.
Yeah, really dangerous. Linebackers and offensive linemen are the highest risk in football. I think defensive backs are as well. You'd think a wide receiver going across the middle that's going to get pounded would be, but it's actually the defensive backs who are doing the hitting. So those are the 3 positions that are most vulnerable in football. But it's really it's very common. And I've spent many years on the sidelines working as a team physician. And when you have a good athletic trainer, that is so important, because they know these kids. They've seen them from day to day, and when you watch them get up off after a play, and they kind of they sort of stumble around, they go to the other team's huddle, or you can just see they're dazed, and you have to pay attention to that, and you have to call them off the field and evaluate them. And usually when you see that, that's usually a concussion, right? But if you don't know and you're not paying attention, you can miss it. And these kids, they get excited about playing. They'll try to play through it, and it can be real dangerous.
If you're a parent or somebody and kids come in from playing outside, what are some of the things that you might look for if you start to think, I wonder if he or she hit their head, is maybe they're acting in a way that might lead me to think there's a concussion. What would that look like?
Well, that's a great question. And one of the points to make is sometimes those symptoms, you don't see those right away. Sometimes it's hours or even days later. But there's 4 areas where you'll find changes. One is changes in emotion. So anxiety, nervous, depressed, irritable. Personality changes. That's a loved one would maybe pick up on that. Another area would be sleep disorders, either not able to sleep or sleeping too much or not able to fall asleep or just being drowsy. Another area is the cognitive changes. So things like confusion, fogginess, problems with focusness or focusing, slurred speech, and just a diminished response to verbal questions. So those are cognitive thinking kind of issues, that blank stare. You see that a lot on the sidelines with a football player. And then the last area are the physical changes. So headaches, fatigue, sensitivity to bright lights or loud noises, pupils being dilated, seizures and balance problems, ringing in the ears. I've seen that also, ringing in the ears and balance issues. So those would be the symptoms you look for. So again, these are emotional changes, these are sleep issues, cognitive, thinking problems, and then the physical kind of symptoms that you get. So those are the things you look for. And of course, as a parent, if you see anything that's different, and normally there's a headache involved, but not always. But if you see anything different, don't take any chances. Just let them be seen, because once you've had that first concussion, you're more vulnerable to the next one. And sometimes that next concussion comes with a much softer blow. You'd think, oh, they just fell off their bike. Well, no, they hit their head, and it might have looked like it wasn't very hard or impactful to you, but with a brain that's already been injured, they're more vulnerable. And so we have to be real careful with it.
I don't remember what the term is. Explain, if you can, the difference between, let's say, a student athlete at the high school level gets a concussion. At what point are they allowed to go back to study? And then at what point are they allowed to go back to playing their sport? Because that's not always the same, right?
Right. And, the Ohio High School Athletic Association has really excellent guidelines, and coaches and trainers should be aware of those, and medical personnel as well. And over the years, what I've seen is we're being much more conservative. I think we need to. So when an athlete is injured and has a concussion, the recommendation has been they shouldn't even be in school. You want them to rest their brain completely, because if you're trying to focus on algebra, sitting in a classroom with a headache, and you can't focus, and you're trying to use this brain that's been injured, it will delay the recovery. So they need to be home. They need to be away from anything that makes them have to use their brain at any high level. But the other thing that they need to do, and this is where kids don't want to do this, is they should not be on an iPad or a cell phone. They should not be looking at a device with a light in it, because often the photophobia, that light sensitivity, makes it worse. Maybe you watch an hour or two of TV on a big TV that you're sitting far away from, but you really need to be careful, and you should avoid all these devices to allow the brain to heal. So once you've healed at home and just resting and no symptoms of any type at home, and avoiding these devices, then you can go back to school. But then it's that return to play. And what we say is, once you've been asymptomatic for 24 hours, you go to the next level. So maybe you've had this injury, and when you're thinking and trying to do schoolwork, you have a headache or your vision's blurry. Well, you don't do anything until that's gone. And then once that's gone, okay, now you can go back to school. And then the return to play protocols are light activity. Maybe you walk and make sure that you don't have any headaches or symptoms there. And then from walking, you go to jogging. And then from jogging, it's moderate activity. So if you're a football player, you maybe put your helmet and shoulder pads on, and you go through some drills, but there's no contact. And then finally, 24 hours of no symptoms at moderate activity. Now you can go full contact, and let's make sure there's no symptoms. So it's gradual. And most schools have athletic trainers. They're really good at this. They can really help us in the medical field work together, because they see them and they know what's going on. So that's how you do that gradual return to play.
And everybody has to follow the trainer or the team doctor in the case of an athlete, to be able to come back and play at full speed, I guess.
Right, and I think coaches are really supportive of that as well. I mean, there's medical legal issues, if a kid goes back and they're not ready. So I don't think, in general, the coaches, they want to be very compliant with this. Obviously, sometimes it's the parents that push the kids, and I know as a father who had sons that played football, I wasn't that kind of a dad, but boy, when they got injured, I couldn't wait for them to get back. I was trying to do everything I could to help them heal quickly. That's where you get into that slippery slope of, hey, we got to be smart about this. Let's make sure they're safe, because as I mentioned with concussions, if you've had one, you're much more likely to have a second and a third, and those are cumulative over the years with each successive concussion, and that can lead to the encephalopathic problems that some of the professional athletes suffer with after retirement.
Yeah, those are cruel. Well, hey, thanks for being in here, and don't play rugby for a while.
I'm going to stay away from that one. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Tim McKnight, in with us here on Talk with the Doc this morning.